Hi everyone, welcome back to Backyard Boat Building with Sean. In this episode number 1, I'm going to be lofting the boat design called the Big Ben Garvey. When I say lofting, what does that actually mean? Well, lofting a boat is the process of drawing a boat out to full size based on the dimensions taken from a small scale plan. You're probably asking, why do I need to loft a boat out full size? First of all, lofting full size allows the builder to correct any errors that may have crept into the small scale plans. You will also be able to get out the shape of your station molds. You can now build your keel, your transom, and many other important parts of the boat. And when it comes time for setting up your station molds, you'll be able to drop all these parts into place, and it actually becomes like building a puzzle. The first thing in lofting is to set up a lofting table. On the lofting table, you have to draw a lofting grid. The lofting grid consists of a baseline, which on this design is going to double as the center line, which is at least the length of the boat and the station lines that run perfectly perpendicular to the baseline. On this design, the Big Ben Garvey has 8 station lines spaced 24 inches apart, and then we have the bow section and the stern section of the boat. The plans come with what's called a table of offsets. The table of offsets consists of a set of dimensions, usually measured in feet, inches, and on this plan, 1/16 of an inch to the outside of the planking. There are 2 sections in the table of offsets. One is called the half breadths from the center line. That will be the measurement at each station as if you were looking down at the boat from the center line, out to the shear line, and then again out to the chine. The other section in the table of offsets is called the heights from the baseline. That will be the dimensions at each station as viewed in profile, are as if looking from the side of the boat, from the baseline to the shear, also to the chine, and then to the keel. These are some of the tools I'll be using. Multiple length aluminum rulers, a small scale ruler, a 25-foot measuring tape, a protractor, pen, pencil, and a Sharpie felt pen, a hammer, and 4-penny finish nails for marking my offset points and reference points. I will begin by drawing the shear line heights from the baseline at each station. I will only draw a couple of them in the beginning and then skip to station 8 in the stern to save from being repetitious. I will overlay the drawing in the top corner and use blue arrows to indicate the baseline and the shear line at the station I'm working on. I have just marked off the height of the shear line from the baseline at station 3, and I'm placing a 4-penny finish nail at that point. I'm now going to move over to station 4. I will check the table of offsets for the distance from the baseline to the shear line at station 4. I'll then place my ruler against the nail at the intersection of the baseline and station 4. I will then measure down the distance given in the table of offsets for station 4. I'll mark that point with a pencil, and then I'll hammer a 4-penny nail in it. I have skipped ahead a couple of stations. I am now at station 8, and I have placed the edge of my ruler at the intersection of station 8 and the baseline. I've checked the table of offsets for the height of the shear line from the baseline at station 8. I'm going to once again measure down that distance, mark it with a pencil, and then I'll place a finish nail in it. As you may have noticed already, I'm at the last station for the shear height, which is at the stern. I've already checked the dimension for the shear height at the stern. Again, my ruler is placed against the baseline and the stern station intersection. I will measure down the distance given in the offset table, mark it with a pencil, and nail it. Now it's time to bend a batten around all the points we plotted for the shear line. I'll use spring clamps to hold the batten in place. What I am going to look for is that the batten is touching the nails at each station without any hard bends, or that any nails are an unreasonable distance away from the batten. If we do see something like that, we correct it by figuring out if it was an error in the offset table or if someone lofting the boat full size made a mistake measuring it out. You will shortly see one of these instances. Here is a good example of one of those instances. I noticed my batten wasn't bending fair around this area. I went back and checked the dimensions in the table of offsets and compared that to what I marked off at these stations. It turns out I happened to make a wrong measurement at station 4. These things happen. It's easily fixed now. It's only a pencil mark and a new nail. Now that the batten is bending in a fair curve, I can go ahead and draw a pencil line connecting all my points. And here we go again. Something here is definitely way off. You can see the batten making a hard bend. I checked the dimensions in the offset table to what I measured out, and they were the same. It only took me a second though to realize that I placed my point below the baseline when it should have been above it. It's another mistake of mine that can easily be fixed again. After finishing drawing the chine half-breadth line, you will notice me staring at it a lot. The line I drew matches the shape on the plans, but looks a little more extreme when drawn out full size. This boat, unlike most boats, doesn't have a pointy bow section. A boat with a pointy bow, when drawn out in this view, the chine line would continuously curve into the center line as it approaches the bow. The Big Bend Garvey has a flat bow section, so the line looked a little odd to me at first. After further review of the plans, some checking of my drawn points, and a little head scratching, it seemed to all make sense. So, I'm going to accept it and go with it. Now I'll take a minute and walk over the lofting table since I know the pencil lines weren't showing up very well in the video. You will notice that all the lines are very fair without any sudden changes or hard bends in it. You will also notice that when I finish drawing a line and I'm happy with it, I go back and label what line it is at each station. This saves on confusion later. This is a very easy and relatively quick design to loft. There is only 5 lines needed to loft this boat. If I could give you any advice though, it would be to take your time, measure, correct if needed, and mark as accurately as possible. Doing so now will create a much more fair boat that will require less sanding and filling of high and low spots when that time comes. Now I have one more short clip to show you of lofting, or expanding the transom as it is called. It is done a little bit differently than the rest of the boat. I will try to explain as best I can why and how to expand the transom using these pictures, and then I'll actually do it. The picture on the left shows the transom on the body plan. For lack of a better term, I'm going to say that in this view, it is actually an inaccurate representation of the actual size of the transom. The reason being is because this view shows the transom as if it is perfectly vertical like all the stations, when in reality it has rake or angle to it, as can be seen in the picture to the right. If you measured the distance of the transom in the body plan from the shear to the keel, where the red arrows are, and built your transom according to this dimension, it would come out too short. That's because you're not accounting for the rake of the transom, which makes it a little longer. You have to take your dimensions off the transom as measured parallel to the rake of the transom. So you need to measure from the shear to the keel, where the blue arrows are on the right. Now, take that measurement and on a separate board, draw that as your new center line and mark the top as the shear and the bottom as the keel. Now, either measure from the keel up or from the shear down to where the chine point meets the transom. I'm going to measure from the shear down and use green arrows to represent that. Take that measurement now over to your new center line and mark it. Now you need to use a square and draw lines at these points perpendicular to the new center line. Now I will demonstrate how this is all done and how to complete drawing the transom. It's a little hard to tell, but I have a separate piece of 1/2" MDF primed white. I clamped my ruler along the edge and I'm going to draw in my new center line. Go back over to the transom again and measure the distance along the rake of the transom from the shear down to the chine and write down the dimension. Place the ruler along the edge of your new center line. Pick a place to start and put a mark there for the shear. Then measure down from there the distance you got from the shear to the chine and put another mark there. Next, I will move over to the transom and measure the length of the transom along the rake from the shear to the keel. Write down that dimension and go back over to the expanded transom. Place the ruler again along your new center line with the end right on your shear mark. Measure down the distance you got from the shear to the keel and place a mark there. Next, I will use a square and place it against the center line at the mark I made for the chine. I will then draw a line perpendicular to the center line. I will then use a longer ruler to extend that line a little bit further. Then I check the table of offsets on the half breadth section from the center line for the distance from the center line to the chine at the stern. Put a mark on the line at that distance. Now I will do the same thing for the shear. Take the square and place it against the center line at the mark for the shear. Then draw a line perpendicular to the center line. Again, use the ruler to extend that line a little bit further. Now go back, check the table of offsets on the half breadths from the center line for the distance from the center line to the shear at the stern. Put a mark on the line at that distance. Now to complete drawing the transom, I will take my ruler and place one end on my keel point and the other against the point for the chine. I will draw a line between those 2 points. Now move the ruler and place it against the mark for the chine and the mark for the shear and draw a line to connect those 2 points. I have now completed drawing my expanded transom. If you made it to the end of this episode, then thank you for watching. I know it can get a little technical and repetitious, but hopefully you were able to take something from it. If you did, then click the subscribe button and check back soon for episode 2, where I will show you how I like to make the patterns for the station molds from the lines I just drew. So, until then, I'll see you soon. Bye.